In today's video, I'm going to show you how to avoid unwanted shadows on your background, and we're going to do it by changing the quality of light, the position of your subject, or the position of your light. Hey everybody, Lindsay Adler here, and when I'm looking at people's photographs and giving them critique, one of the things that gives away that maybe they're a little less experienced in the studio is when they have distracting shadows on the background. When the shadows are there, it shows me that they probably don't really know how to control and shape their light. And so what I want to do today is talk about the 3 things that you can do to control these shadows or to eliminate them altogether. The first one has to do with the quality of light. The second variable is your subject's distance from the background. And then third, of course, is the placement of your main light. So we're going to look at all 3 of those. First, we're going to begin with quality of light because this is going to make the biggest impact to how visible and noticeable shadows are in your scene. One of the things to remember is that the softer you can get your light, the less you'll notice those shadows. Now, how I describe it is if you choose a hard light, so it could be bare bulb, or it could be a hard light modifier, or it could be going out in the sun. Any of those will give you very defined shadow edges. I mean, think of it. I step out in the sun, you see a really sharp shadow cast behind my body, where the shadow next to my nose or my jawline are really, really defined. Now, what happens when the cloud comes through? All of a sudden, everything is really soft and diffused. You barely notice the shadow on the ground. This concept is absolutely true in the studio. So if you see really defined shadows that you don't want, maybe try a softer modifier. This could be grabbing a softbox, and it can be going for a bigger modifier. So for example, a 3-foot octabox to a 5-foot octabox. The 5-foot is going to give you a softer quality of light. Going from a small umbrella to an extra large umbrella with diffusion is going to give you softer light. So remember, larger modifiers and diffuse modifiers are going to make those shadow edges a little bit less noticeable. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a look at that in action. I'm going to first take a shot with a bare bulb. This is going to give us an extremely defined shadow edge. It's going to be so distracting on the background. But then we're going to switch it around and put on a large umbrella with diffusion. All right, so let's start with our first shot. All right, so for this first shot, what you'll notice is that shadow on the background is super distracting. It is very noticeable. In fact, it is competing with the size and attention of her body. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to that large umbrella with diffusion, making it a soft and wrapping light source, and see what difference it makes to the shadow. We're not going to change the position of the light, only the modifier. The difference between these 2 shots is night and day. In the second shot, look at the shadow by her feet or cast on the background. You can barely see it. And that's because our softer quality of light not only wraps around the subject, but also gives a much more gradual shadow edge. So if I'm ever struggling to avoid a shadow on the background, maybe it's because I'm in a tight space, I reach for a softer light modifier, and that is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting. That being said, I want to give myself a challenge so you can see exactly what I'm up against when I'm working with harder light. So what we're going to do is we're going to switch back to the bare bulb and show you how the other variables come into play. The next thing to consider is your subject's distance from the background. Now, of course, this becomes much more of a challenge if you're forced to shoot in a small or compact space. And that's why in those situations, my quality of light makes a big difference. But if I have the ability to move my subject further away from the background, that helps so much to get rid of that distracting shadow. Think of it this way. Regardless of where your light is, the subject is going to cast a shadow behind them. But if the background's really close, it runs into the background. However, as the background's further away, the shadow can kind of drift onto the floor. So I want to show you using a light in the exact same position, bare bulb, so it's a hard quality of light with those shadow edges, how much of a difference it makes by just moving the subject out a few feet. In this shot, you'll notice I no longer have a problem with the shadow on the background. The shadow is still there, but it's primarily on the floor, and you'll also notice that it kind of falls out of the frame to the right-hand side. All I did is move her forward maybe 4 feet, and it completely changed the position of the shadow, and therefore no longer a distracting shadow on the background. So the first thing I go to is considering changing the quality of my light. And the next thing is, if I have the ability to, maybe I can move the subject just a little bit further from the background. The closer they are, the more of a challenge it will be for you. And of course, the last variable we have to think about is the position of our light. And when I talk about the position of the light, I mean side to side and up and down, so the height of the light. Now, when you move the light further off axis from the subject, so further off to the side, it creates more shadows on one side of the face, this is true, but it also moves the shadows. And what it's doing is it's taking the shadow that might be hitting the background and it moves it and kicks it across the frame so it's not intersecting the background anymore. I find that to be one of my favorite little tweaks to just adjust that shadow a tiny bit. Now with the height, I'm usually considering this for crop shots. Sometimes the shadow is going to be in the corner of the frame, but raising the light up just a little bit, it actually lowers the shadow behind the subject and possibly out of my composition. So let's take a look at what is achieved when we move the position of our main light. So it's just like I mentioned in this shot. As we move the light off to the side, yes, there's more shadow on the side of her face, but no longer is there a shadow on the background. As you can see, these three main variables do a lot to get rid of shadows on your background. So whether you're changing the quality of light, the distance of your subject from the background, or moving the position of your main light, all of these things really help you reduce unwanted or distracting shadows. That being said, you don't have to stop there. For example, if you have multiple strobes, you could light the background to help you get rid of a shadow. And then something else to consider is some of the changes that I make change the overall mood of the image. For example, in the first variable, when I change the modifier and I change the quality of light, this changes the mood of the image. So maybe I actually want hard light. Well, then I'm going to have to consider moving the subject or changing the position of the main light. It's not one of these alone, but how these three variables work together. So when I'm shooting, typically what I do is I grab the modifier that's giving me the quality of light that I want. Then I move my subject as far away from the background as I can if the shadow is distracting. And then I make little tweaks to the position of my light side to side and up and down to kick the shadow out of the frame. Of course, you've just seen these changes in real time, but the best way to learn this and to be able to solve these problems quickly is to practice. So grab a subject, grab a mannequin head, move your light around, move the position, and you'll be able to solve these problems on set with a real subject or client in no time. Now, if you want to see the gear that I use to make these images, be sure to check out the links in the description below, and of course, visit adorama.com. I have so many videos that goes through more advanced lighting or problem solving just like this, so be sure to like and subscribe. See you next time, guys.